The military base buzzed with controlled chaos, the sound of boots clattering against concrete, the low hum of conversation blending with distant orders being barked over radios. Sunlight streamed through the large mess hall windows, illuminating rows of tables crowded with trainees, young men and women fresh from weeks of grueling orientation, their uniforms crisp, their faces bright with a mixture of pride and fatigue. Among them walked Lieutenant Rachel Harper, her movements careful, measured. A scar stretched across her right forearm, her left leg slightly stiff, a reminder of the last deployment that had nearly ended her career. Despite the injury, she moved with an undeniable confidence, the kind forged only through hardship, combat, and unrelenting discipline. As Rachel passed, several SEAL trainees noticed her limp, whispering under their breaths, eyes narrowing in mockery. "Look at her," one muttered, voice laced with derision. "Think she can keep up with us?" A snicker followed. They assumed her limp made her vulnerable, easy to belittle, a target for their arrogance and bravado. Little did they know this woman had faced situations that would make most men falter: hostile territory, gunfire, chaotic ambushes, and had emerged not only alive but victorious. Her injuries were nothing but markers of battles fought and won, yet their ignorance blinded them to the truth. Rachel walked past the first few tables, her head held high. She could feel their gazes on her, the heavy weight of judgment and unspoken challenge. It would have been easy to be defensive, to respond with anger, yet she remained calm, every step measured, every breath controlled. This was not just a walk through a mess hall. It was a subtle test of character, a quiet assertion of presence. Around her, the chatter in the hall continued, oblivious to the storm simmering beneath the surface. Some trainees laughed at jokes that stung with subtle cruelty, thinking themselves clever. Others, quieter and more observant, merely watched, sensing that something about Rachel was different, though they couldn't yet define it. Rachel took her usual seat, a spot at the end of the table, her movements deliberate but effortless. She unpacked her lunch slowly, deliberately, as though signaling she was aware of the attention but completely unbothered by it. Her eyes scanned the room, not in fear, not in anticipation of attack, but in careful observation. She noted who moved with confidence, who hid behind arrogance, who tried to appear stronger than they were. Each glance, each subtle shift in posture was catalogued, processed. Every disrespectful comment, every smirk directed her way, was recorded for later, a lesson she intended to teach without drama, without noise. The SEALs, emboldened by what they assumed was her passivity, whispered louder, edging closer. "Bet she can't do a push-up without collapsing," one sneered, trying to draw laughter from the nearby table. Another stepped forward, tapping the edge of her tray. "Careful there, wouldn't want to drop that tray, ma'am." They laughed, expecting her to flinch, to react, to prove their assumptions correct. But Rachel Harper didn't. She smiled faintly, a small, almost imperceptible curve of her lips, one that carried weight, history, and warning. There was power in that smile, a quiet assertion that she knew more than they could imagine, that she had seen more than they could ever endure. Nearby instructors glanced toward the scene, nodding the tension. Some shook their heads slightly, predicting that the arrogant behavior of the SEALs would soon meet its reckoning. Others, more experienced, leaned back and watched quietly, aware that true leadership often revealed itself not in words or threats, but in composure, observation, and timing. Rachel's presence alone had transformed a normal morning into a subtle battlefield of respect, testing the arrogance of the young men who thought themselves untouchable. She ate slowly, deliberately, savoring not just the meal but the moment. The mess hall, filled with chatter and laughter, had become a stage. She, seemingly fragile but unyielding, was the center of it. Every glance, every whisper, every ill-conceived joke was being carefully noted. The first cracks in the smug confidence of the SEALs had begun to form, though they remained blissfully unaware that the coming hours would shift every assumption they held. Rachel Harper, wounded yet unbroken, was already commanding the room, her authority subtle but unmistakable, and the lesson of respect had only just begun. The murmurs around the mess hall grew louder as the SEAL trainees huddled closer, convinced that their targets of ridicule would finally react. "Bet she can't handle the standard obstacle run," one said, elbowing another with a grin. "I'd pay to see her trip over that leg brace." Their laughter rang false, forced, as though they were attempting to mask an underlying uncertainty. Rachel Harper, seated calmly at the corner table, didn't flinch. Her eyes scanned the group, noting the subtle tension in their posture, the quick flicks of the eyes, the restless shifting of weight, the slight hesitations masked as bravado. She knew their type: young, brash, confident in their physicality but lacking patience and foresight. They measured strength in raw power, not intelligence or strategy. In combat, such arrogance was a fatal flaw. Rachel had seen it countless times in the chaos of enemy territory, when soldiers who relied solely on brute force were the first to falter. She allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile to cross her lips, a quiet acknowledgement that she understood exactly what they were trying to do, and exactly how easy it would be to turn their arrogance against them. One of the trainees, bolder than the rest, stepped forward, tapping her tray with a knuckle in a faux gesture of concern. "Careful there, ma'am," he said, voice dripping with mock politeness. "Wouldn't want to hurt yourself carrying all that food." He smirked, expecting laughter from his peers. The others snickered, leaning into the perceived humor. A few even began mimicking her limp, exaggerating their movements for effect. The scene was carefully orchestrated, each small action designed to provoke humiliation. Rachel Harper didn't respond immediately. She continued eating, each bite deliberate, each movement calm, measured. Her gaze swept the room again, and in that quiet observation lay a subtle power that the SEALs failed to recognize. She saw the cracks forming beneath their arrogance, the nervous glance exchanged between two trainees, the hesitation in the voice of the ringleader, the barely contained tension in the way they shifted weight from foot to foot. Her calmness was a mirror, reflecting their immaturity, their impulsiveness, and their underestimation of her capabilities. Senior instructors stationed unobtrusively near the back of the hall observed quietly. One of them leaned forward slightly, whispering to a colleague, "Watch, she's assessing, strategizing. They won't see it coming." Another simply shook his head with a faint smile. Rachel's presence had already begun to command attention. Respect wasn't demanded through words or threats, it was quietly claimed, subtly and deliberately. The trainees, however, unaware of the undercurrent of authority she projected, persisted with their mockery, failing to grasp that their actions were being catalogued, analyzed, and prepared for a precise counter. Rachel finally looked up, eyes meeting the bold trainee's gaze. There was no fear, no defensiveness. Instead, there was a calm, measured intensity that suggested she had already calculated the consequences of their behavior. Her lips curled in a faint smile, almost imperceptible, and she tilted her head slightly, not in submission but in that the game had begun. She wasn't here to humiliate or retaliate recklessly. She was here to teach a lesson, to demonstrate that strength isn't always measured by muscle or bravado. The SEALs, sensing no immediate response, exchanged uneasy glances. The leader of the group laughed nervously, attempting to regain control of the situation. "All right, maybe she's tougher than she looks," he muttered under his breath. But the uncertainty had taken root. Even their laughter sounded hollow now. For the first time, doubt crept in, subtle yet undeniable. Rachel Harper, wounded but unbroken, had shifted the dynamic without uttering a single word. Her composure alone had begun to crack their arrogance, and the first seeds of respect and fear had been planted. As Rachel finished her meal and rose slowly, the tension in the room thickened. Every step she took was measured, purposeful, yet unhurried. She was no longer simply a Marine walking through the mess hall. She was an embodiment of authority, experience, and quiet power. The SEALs had underestimated her, and in moments they would begin to understand exactly why that was a mistake. The air in the mess hall crackled with quiet tension. Rachel Harper's calm had unsettled the SEAL trainees more than any shouted insult could. The boldest among them, a trainee named Briggs, stepped forward, his chest puffed with false confidence. "All right, ma'am," he said, voice dripping with mock politeness. "How about a quick demonstration? Standard obstacle drill. Let's see if you can keep up." Laughter erupted among the others. They expected hesitation, a limp dragging her down, an embarrassed refusal. What they didn't anticipate was Rachel's response, a silent, confident nod. She rose from her seat with deliberate grace, adjusting her uniform, letting her presence fill the room. Every step was calculated, her limp barely noticeable in the control of her movement. The SEALs' laughter faltered as they recognized the determination in her eyes. Rachel wasn't there to argue or explain. She was there to act, to show through skill and precision what words could never convey. Their assumptions, rooted in arrogance and ignorance, were about to crumble. Rachel moved toward the drill area outside the mess hall. The group followed, some eager to watch a spectacle they assumed would confirm their superiority. As she prepared at the starting line, she surveyed the obstacles: low walls, rope climbs, balance beams, and the infamous horizontal ladder. Her mind cataloged every element, their likely strategies, potential mistakes, and optimal movements. Years of experience, both in combat and in rigorous training, allowed her to anticipate not only her own execution, but theirs as well. Sensing an opportunity to assert dominance, took the lead. He dashed forward, muscles rippling, confidence radiating from every movement. His teammates followed, expecting Rachel to fall behind, struggling against her injury. But she moved with a calculated efficiency that turned her apparent disadvantage into precision. Her steps were measured, conserving energy while maximizing leverage. Every climb, every jump, every landing was executed flawlessly, controlled, and deliberate. The trainees began to exchange uneasy glances, murmurs replacing laughter. Something was off. Halfway through the course, Rachel's limp became a non-issue. She navigated the rope climb with ease, swung across the horizontal ladder without hesitation, and vaulted over low walls with tactical precision. Her body, though injured, moved like a weapon, each motion purposeful, efficient, and commanding respect without a single word. The SEALs, their arrogance fatting, found themselves scrambling to match her pace. Their confidence wavered, their laughter replaced by disbelief. How could someone with an injury move with such power and control? By the time she reached the final balance beam, the trainees were openly flustered. Attempted to regain composure, forcing himself to match her steps, but his movements were rushed, uncalculated, and prone to error. Rachel's eyes scanned him, reading his mistakes before they happened, adjusting her pace accordingly. Her calmness became a weapon, her confidence a mirror reflecting their inadequacies. Each trainee's misstep underscored their hubris. The lesson, subtle but undeniable, began to take root. Underestimating her had been their first mistake. Finally, Rachel completed the course, stepping down with a controlled grace, her chest rising steadily, her eyes unwavering. She didn't gloat, didn't announce her victory. Her performance spoke for itself. The SEALs stood frozen, embarrassed, caught between disbelief and begrudging respect. Their jokes had been silenced, their arrogance dismantled by quiet competence. Rachel Harper had transformed from a wounded observer into a commanding presence, her skill and composure asserting authority over those who had tried to diminish her. As she walked back toward the mess hall, the subtle nods of recognition from senior instructors reinforced her unspoken lesson. She had proven not only her physical capability but her strategic mind, her unflinching resolve, and the quiet power of experience. The SEALs had learned their first hard truth. Strength is not always visible, and underestimating anyone, especially someone like Rachel Harper, could be a costly mistake. The exercise had ended, but the tension lingered like an unspoken storm. Rachel Harper returned to her table, unhurried, her calm presence radiating authority. The SEAL trainees who had mocked her earlier now sat in uneasy silence, murmurs replaced by a creeping awareness that their assumptions had been shattered. Yet Rachel knew the challenge wasn't over. Their arrogance might have faltered, but it was far from extinguished. Some would double down, testing limits, trying to reclaim the dominance they had assumed was theirs by default. She would allow them this illusion for now. Senior instructors observed quietly from a distance, eyes narrowing with interest. One murmured, "She's not done. Watch how she handles the next round." Rachel's mind, even at rest, was active, cataloging weaknesses, predicting impulsive decisions, and planning tactical responses. She noted which trainees rushed, which relied on brute strength, and which hesitated under pressure. These subtle observations would shape her approach. The SEAL's energy, once chaotic and blusterous, became raw material for a lesson she intended to teach. Methodically, precisely, without unnecessary spectacle. Later, the SEALs convened for the team exercise outside the mess hall. They believed the next drill would reaffirm their superiority, especially after observing Rachel's injury and assuming physical limitation. But Rachel approached the scenario differently. She didn't need to intimidate with words. She commanded through observation, analysis, and tactical foresight. She walked alongside her team, whispering subtle commands that orchestrated movement with surgical precision. Every trainee, every obstacle, every minor decision was part of a calculated plan. Briggs, still reeling from the earlier embarrassment, attempted to regain his ego by dominating his team's decisions. "Move faster, don't wait," he barked, his voice tense, masking doubt. Rachel's eyes tracked him and his followers, noting how impatience led to missteps. She adjusted her team's movements to exploit their overconfidence. Gaps in formation, hesitation during transitions, poorly timed climbs. Her own injury became a non-factor. Every motion she executed was precise, conserving energy while guiding her teammates through the most efficient routes. By the halfway point, the SEALs were visibly frustrated. Their arrogance had been weaponized against them, each misstep catalogued and countered. Rachel's team moved fluidly, like a single entity, following commands that were quiet, unassuming, yet unmistakably effective. Observers noted the contrast. The SEALs, disorganized and chaotic despite raw strength, versus the calm precision of Rachel's unit. The lesson was clear. Intelligence, observation, and strategic thinking could outweigh brute force. Her leadership, subtle but absolute, was turning every action by the mocking SEALs into evidence of their folly. Rachel's calm authority also affected her own team. They trusted her implicitly, following her guidance without hesitation. The SEALs' energy, once dominating, now worked against them. Rachel anticipated each overreach, each poorly timed maneuver, and subtly guided her team to counter without overt conflict. She wasn't humiliating them for entertainment. She was demonstrating with precise execution the consequences of arrogance and disrespect. Every observer could see the discrepancy: preparation, composure, and intelligence versus rash impulsiveness. As the exercise concluded, the SEALs were flustered, exhausted, and embarrassed. Their supposed advantage, youth, strength, and swagger, had been dismantled not by confrontation, but by calculated observation and tactical mastery. Rachel Harper's presence had transformed from a silent challenge into an undeniable command. The instructors nodded approvingly, knowing the next stage would cement the lesson. True authority is not imposed. It is quietly earned, strategically demonstrated, and impossible to ignore once established. Rachel returned to the sidelines, unhurried, eyes scanning every movement. The SEALs' discomfort was palpable, the first seeds of understanding planted. Arrogance, they now realized, could be undone by patience, intelligence, and experience. They were learning, albeit begrudgingly, that underestimating anyone, especially someone like Rachel Harper, could be a grave mistake. The next drill commenced under the bright morning sun, the base alive with the distant hum of activity and the rhythmic clatter of boots. Rachel Harper stood at the ready, surveying the course with calm precision. Each obstacle, a network of rope climbs, balance beams, walls, and tactical maneuver challenges, was familiar, yet her mind wasn't merely focused on her own performance. She studied the SEALs' positioning, their habitual rush, their tendency to underestimate details. Every movement was a variable to exploit. This wasn't just a drill. It was the moment to turn arrogance into hard-earned humility. Briggs led his team again, attempting to project confidence. "Keep pace," he barked, forcing rapid movement, trying to assert dominance. The others scrambled after him, but Rachel had already anticipated their predictable errors. Their impulsive energy became their weakness, each misstep an opening. She whispered concise commands to her teammates, guiding them with subtle gestures and quiet, precise instructions. They moved fluidly, responding instinctively to her guidance, executing maneuvers that combined strategy with efficiency. Rachel's injury, once assumed to be a liability, was irrelevant. Every motion demonstrated her mastery, a blend of experience and calculated restraint. The SEALs approached the first obstacle, a series of high walls demanding speed and strength. Vaulted with reckless power, momentum driving him forward, only to misjudge timing and lose balance mid-climb. Rachel's team observed, adjusted, and moved methodically. Every member followed her calculated rhythm, scaling walls with precision while maintaining formation. Even when a teammate faltered slightly, Rachel's whispered guidance corrected course seamlessly, keeping the unit coordinated. The SEALs faltered again at the rope climb. Impatience caused slips, missed grips, and brief but critical pauses. Rachel's calm composure contrasted sharply with their chaotic energy, highlighting the power of discipline over raw force. By the halfway point, the SEALs' frustration mounted visibly. Shouts replaced laughter, commands became urgent, even panicked. Rachel's team executed the horizontal ladder flawlessly, her precise timing and measured momentum ensuring smooth transitions. The mocking confidence of the SEALs crumbled further. One by one, missteps cascaded into compounded mistakes, their earlier arrogance now a liability. Rachel's quiet observation turned into active advantage. Each overreach and miscalculated move was exploited without unnecessary confrontation. She didn't shout or berate. They undermined themselves through predictable behavior, her guidance amplifying the contrast. The final obstacle, a narrow balance beam, marked the climax of the drill. Rachel's team approached in perfect coordination, every step deliberate. Attempted to lead aggressively, his foot slipping once, then twice, forcing him to pause. Rachel, with controlled grace, crossed flawlessly, signaling her team forward with subtle nods. Observers noted the stark disparity: precision versus impulsiveness, calm versus chaos. The SEALs, despite brute strength and effort, struggled to match, their earlier laughter replaced by glaring frustration. For the first time, the arrogance that had fueled mockery yielded to humility, a lesson imposed by silent authority. When Rachel completed the final obstacle, she stepped down smoothly, chest rising steadily, gaze unwavering. Her team followed seamlessly, executed flawlessly under her quiet command. The SEALs stood scattered, breathless, embarrassed, struggling to reconcile their failure with prior confidence. Senior instructors nodded from the sidelines, impressed by Rachel's leadership and tactical execution. The wounded Marine, underestimated and mocked just minutes before, had orchestrated a decisive victory. Without raising her voice, without theatrics, relying solely on skill, strategy, and poise. Rachel's calm authority lingered in the air, commanding respect from every observer. The SEAL's arrogance had been dismantled, replaced by grudging acknowledgement. The lesson was profound. Raw strength alone was no match for intelligence, composure, and decisive leadership. In the silence that followed, it was clear that Rachel Harper had not only executed the drill perfectly, she had rewritten expectations, demonstrating that respect must be earned and assumptions can be dangerously misleading. The exercise had ended, yet the echoes of its outcome reverberated across the training field. The SEALs, once smug and mocking, were scattered, breathless, flustered, and visibly shaken. Their arrogance, so carefully cultivated, had crumbled under Rachel Harper's silent authority. Briggs, usually brimming with confidence, stood with arms crossed, jaw tight, unable to conceal the frustration that gnawed at him. Every glance exchanged between the trainees betrayed disbelief. They had underestimated her, and now they were forced to confront the harsh truth. Physical strength alone could not outmatch skill, strategy, and unwavering composure. Rachel, however, remained calm, composed, and unhurried. Her chest rose steadily, and her gaze swept across the field, assessing not only her team's performance but the SEALs' reactions. She did not gloat, nor did she celebrate. Her authority did not require spectacle. Every controlled movement, every precise decision during the exercise had spoken louder than words ever could. The SEALs had humiliated themselves with their arrogance, and she had only guided them toward the inevitable conclusion. The lesson, stark and unmissable, was already taking root in their consciousness. Her teammates approached, some flushed with the exhilaration of success, others quiet in the wake of tension. Rachel acknowledged them with a subtle nod, a slight smile that conveyed approval without condescension. "Well done," she said simply, her voice steady, carrying the weight of experience and respect. Her words were brief, yet they reinforced the structure of her leadership, calm, decisive, and focused. The SEALs, in contrast, lingered awkwardly at the edge of the field, unsure how to react. Their previous mockery now seemed foolish, their confidence shaken, their posture uncertain. Finally broke the silence, attempting to mask his embarrassment. "I didn't expect that," he muttered, voice low, lacking the usual bravado. Others nodded subtly, murmuring quiet acknowledgments. Rachel's calm had dismantled their false superiority without a single harsh word or physical intimidation. The humiliation they felt was a product of their own misjudgment, a reflection of their impulsive arrogance. Each trainee now understood viscerally that underestimating someone, even wounded, even quiet, could be dangerous and costly in both pride and performance. Senior instructors observed silently, nodding with quiet approval. One approached Rachel briefly, his expression a mix of admiration and acknowledgement. "You executed perfectly," he said, "not just physically but strategically. They didn't see it coming and you handled it with discipline." Rachel's response was simple, a slight nod, her eyes returning to her team. The lesson had been delivered, the respect earned. This was leadership in its form, quiet, unassuming, yet absolute in its effectiveness. The SEALs, humbled and chastened, began to reflect on their behavior. Their earlier jokes, their arrogance, and their disrespect had been recorded and analyzed, not for revenge, but to demonstrate a simple truth. Skill, composure, and strategic thinking outweigh impulsive bravado. The humiliation they felt was profound but necessary. It was the kind of lesson that could never be taught in lectures or read in manuals. It had to be experienced, internalized, and remembered. As Rachel walked past them, back toward the training headquarters, the weight of her presence lingered. Her limp, once assumed to be a limitation, was now a symbol of resilience. The SEALs followed with reluctant respect, understanding that she had proven something deeper than victory. She had demonstrated the consequences of arrogance and the value of discipline. By the time she reached her destination, the lesson was clear: underestimate her at your peril. The wounded Marine, unbroken and resolute, had turned ridicule into revelation, chaos into order, and disrespect into humility. Her authority was not demanded. It was earned, demonstrated, and impossible to ignore. The air in the training yard had shifted. Where once arrogance and laughter had dominated, a quiet acknowledgement of capability now lingered. The SEAL trainees, their previous bravado muted, gathered in small clusters, exchanging uneasy glances. They no longer saw Rachel Harper as simply a wounded Marine. They saw her as a force, a presence forged through experience, skill, and quiet determination. Briggs, the ringleader of the earlier mockery, hesitated before stepping forward. His hands were slightly shaking, his posture tense. "Lieutenant Harper," he began, voice uncertain, "we misjudged you." The words sounded awkward, stilted, but they carried a weight previously absent. Rachel didn't immediately respond. She regarded him calmly, her eyes steady, exuding authority without aggression. There was no triumph in her gaze, only a quiet assurance that the lesson had been understood. She nodded slightly, allowing the acknowledgement to register. "I expected nothing less," she said evenly. "Mistakes happen when assumptions override observation. Learn from it." Her tone carried no condescension, no need to belabor the humiliation. The effectiveness of her actions had already left an impression deeper than any scolding ever could. Others stepped forward, offering brief nods, murmurs of respect, and quiet apologies. Some laughed nervously, attempting to mask lingering embarrassment, but the sincerity was unmistakable. The SEALs who had mocked her earlier were no longer brash or loud. They moved with caution now, aware that Rachel's competence demanded recognition. She had rewritten their expectations, and the earlier power dynamics had been inverted. Respect had been earned, not through threats, but through performance, strategy, and quiet authority. Senior instructors moved closer, observing the interaction. One, a veteran SEAL with decades of experience, nodded approvingly. "She handled that perfectly," he muttered to a colleague. "Leadership isn't just about physical strength, it's about composure, foresight, and the ability to guide a team through adversity. These trainees just gotta." Rachel listened silently as the instructor's praise affirmed the effectiveness of her approach. She didn't seek accolades. Her goal had been simple: teach, correct, and demonstrate the principles of respect and discipline. The atmosphere shifted further when one of the younger trainees, timid and observant, approached Rachel. I thought I understood strength," he admitted quietly, almost embarrassed. "But watching you, seeing how you moved, how you led, I realize it's more than physical. It's about patience, strategy, and focus. Thank you." Rachel acknowledged him with a faint smile, her nod a quiet affirmation. Moments like this, subtle and often unremarked, were the true markers of leadership. She had influenced not only performance but perspective. Even after lingering, finally allowed a small smile. His earlier defensiveness had been replaced by grudging admiration. "I guess I have a lot to learn," he admitted quietly. Rachel's presence had transformed arrogance into humility, mockery into respect, and doubt into contemplation. Her authority wasn't imposed. It had been earned through experience, skill, and the silent clarity of composure under pressure. The rest of the SEALs, observing, began to shift instinctively. Their energy, once chaotic, now tempered with awareness and respect. Rachel Harper's influence extended beyond her immediate team. It rippled through the group, altering behavior, thought patterns, and expectations. Her demonstration of resilience and intelligence had rewritten the narrative. As the group dispersed, Rachel returned to her seat, calm and unhurried. The murmurs of recognition followed, subtle but persistent. The lesson had been learned. Never underestimate someone who has endured adversity, and never mistake quiet composure for weakness. Respect, Rachel Harper had shown, is not demanded, it is observed, acknowledged, and earned. By the end of the day, the SEALs had internalized the shift. Their attitudes had changed, not out of fear, but out of understanding. Rachel Harper had transformed the dynamic entirely, leaving behind a legacy of respect, leadership, and unbroken resolve. Weeks had passed since the drill that had transformed the dynamic of the base. The memory of Rachel Harper's quiet authority lingered like a subtle but persistent echo, shaping behavior, attitudes, and expectations. New recruits arrived each week, unaware of the story, unaware of the lessons embedded in the walls, the routines, and the silent gaze of a Marine who had commanded respect without shouting or intimidation. Yet for those who had witnessed it firsthand, her presence was indelible, a benchmark against which all others were measured. Rachel moved through the base with the same quiet confidence she had always possessed. Her limp remained, a subtle reminder of injury, but one that now symbolized resilience, experience, and unshakable resolve rather than limitation. Her daily routines, training, oversight, mentoring, and team coordination, carried weight not because of rank alone, but because of the authority she had earned through action. The SEALs who had mocked her now approached with respect, seeking her guidance in small ways, subtly acknowledging lessons learned without the need for overt acknowledgement. Briggs, once the loudest and most arrogant of the mocking trainees, now displayed a quiet professionalism that hadn't existed before. He approached Rachel one afternoon, eyes respectful, tone sincere. "I've been thinking about the drill," he said. "I realized how wrong I was. You've changed how I approach leadership, strategy, and respect. I appreciate it." Rachel nodded, faintly smiling, not as a reward for flattery, but as acknowledgement of genuine growth. Leadership, she knew, was about fostering development quietly and consistently, not seeking validation. Her team observed her every move, learning that discipline, patience, and strategic thinking often mattered more than raw energy or noise. Rachel's approach became a model for mentorship, the calm assessment of situations, precise execution of plans, and subtle guidance that allowed others to learn without humiliation. She emphasized that true authority came from competence and character, not bravado. In the weeks following the drill, these lessons rippled through training exercises, subtly reshaping the culture of the base. Even the senior instructors noted the change. One commented to a colleague, "I've seen many Marines teach lessons in anger or spectacle. Rachel doesn't need that, she demonstrates it. Her team respects her and the rest of the trainees are better for it." The truth of the statement resonated throughout the base. Rachel's example proved that strength was multifaceted. Intelligence, experience, resilience, and quiet authority often outweighed physical prowess or loud confidence. Stories of the drill circulated informally among recruits and instructors alike. The tale of the wounded Marine who turned mockery into respect became legend, not as gossip, but as a blueprint for behavior, a subtle reminder that assumptions could be deadly, arrogance dangerous, and humility earned through observation, action, and perseverance. Newcomers watched her from afar, seeing not just a leader, but a living example of resilience, intelligence, and unshakable determination. For Rachel herself, the drill was already a distant memory, a moment in time that had long-term impact beyond the immediacy of victory. She continued her duties with professionalism, never boasting, never seeking attention, but quietly influencing, mentoring, and guiding those around her. Her legacy was the change she inspired, the respect she commanded, and the subtle but lasting lessons imparted to those who had once underestimated her. As she walked through the base one evening, the sun setting behind the distant mountains, Rachel reflected briefly on the journey. The injuries, the mockery, the tension, they were all part of the path to authority, respect, and influence. She understood deeply that leadership was not about proving superiority, but about shaping outcomes, cultivating respect, and demonstrating that resilience and intelligence often outweigh assumptions. She had earned it not through force, not through words, but through action. And in doing so, she had left an enduring mark on everyone who had doubted her. Rachel Harper, wounded but unbroken, had become more than a Marine. She had become a lesson in power, patience, and quiet strength. Her story would echo long after the laughter faded, a testament to the truth that respect is earned, assumptions are dangerous, and true authority is demonstrated through action and unwavering resolve.